Thanks, Willie Andrew, and thanks to the Community Foundation for Ireland for hosting these webinars. I'm really happy to be here, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. So like Andrew was saying, my name is Tara. I've one of the best jobs in Ireland. I work on Dalkey Island as a tern warden. I work alongside Steve Newton, who is the project manager and the brains behind the operation. And also this year we were lucky enough to get a weekend warden, Joe Proudfoot, who joined the team for the breeding season. So this project, the Dalkey Tern Conservation Project, is funded by Dún Laoghaire County Council, and it's a partnership between Dún Laoghaire County Council and Birdwatch Ireland. Between 2016 and 2020, we were funded by the EU Life Roseate Tern Recovery Project. Self-funding came to an end in 2020, but Dún Laoghaire County Council continued to fund us, for which we're very grateful. The Dalkey Islands are just finish this up and then I'll get into that. So just for this talk, I'm just literally going to talk about the terns, the Dalkey Islands. With terns, I'm going to look at their ecology, some ID tips, and I'll talk about the conservation project itself and why it matters. This is actually a pre-recorded talk, so I'm just going to let it run now, and I'll be here for the Q&A at the end if anybody has any questions. Okay, thanks, William. The Dalkey Islands are a complex of 5 islands and islets lying approximately 300 metres off the South County Dublin coast. Dalkey Island is the largest of the islands at 11.2 hectares. A small herd of feral goats and a relatively large rabbit population live year-round on the island. Their presence is thought to have contributed to the persistence of several rare plant species on Dalkey Island, although an expanding rabbit population can be detrimental to these plants if left unchecked. Lamb Island lies just northwest of Dalkey Island and is the only one of the 4 smaller islands and islets which is vegetated. Lamb and Dalkey Island are connected at low tide. Just to the northwest of Lamb Island lies Maiden Rock. This is a low-lying granite islet. A chain of rocks runs part of the length between Lamb Island and Maiden Rock, and these are known as Clare Rocks. These rocks are used as a roosting site for species such as terns, gulls, shags, cormorants, and even curlew when on passage. Several hundred metres to the east of Dalkey Island lies Muglin's Rock. Terns do not breed on this island, and it is predominated by large breeding gulls. Muglin's is also the resting place of 2 pirates who were hanged on the island in 1765 after murdering passengers on board the ship the Earl of Sandwich. A lighthouse stands on their grave. 3 species of terns, common, Arctic and Roseate Tern, have all bred on the Dalkey Islands, which are designated as a special protection area for these species. Prior to 2016, common terns were the most abundant tern species nesting on the islands. From 2016 onwards, Arctic terns predominated. Roseate terns have not bred on the island since 2016, although a pair were observed in courtship display on Maiden Rock in 2017. Common, Arctic and Roseate terns are small seabirds. These are ground nesting birds. Their nests consist of a small scrape in the ground into which their eggs are laid. These nests are sometimes decorated with small bones or shells, although the exact reasons for this are unknown. Terns lay 1 clutch per season. They typically lay between 1 and 3 eggs. The rule of thumb is if terns lose their clutch before the summer solstice, they are more likely to relay, but if they lose the clutch after this point, they generally won't. In order to protect the eggs from predators, tern eggs are camouflaged. The camouflage used is called disruptive coloration, which simply means that the outline of an object is broken up with a strongly contrasting pattern. It is the same technique that seabirds use, and that is used in khaki. All 3 species nest on islands and cliff faces, and they are all migratory species. Terns are plunge divers and hunt by sight. Their preferred prey are sand eels, herring, and sprat. They make spectacular shallow dives when they catch sight of these silver shoals glinting in the light. All 3 species are amber listed in Ireland, meaning that they are considered vulnerable. This vulnerability is due to a lack of available breeding habitat. During the breeding season, roseate terns have a full black cap, a black bill, and a faint rosy blush across their breast feathers. They have a pale grey mantle and long tail feathers which extend beyond the end of their wingtips, giving rosies an elegant appearance. Overall, they are much paler in appearance than common and Arctic terns, with longer tail streamers. Roseate terns overwinter off the coast of West Africa. They prefer to nest under cover and are much more timid than common and Arctic terns. During the breeding season, common terns have a full black cap and an orange bill with a black tip. They have relatively long orange legs and short tail streamers, which do not extend beyond the wingtips. These short tail streamers give the common tern a boxier appearance than either the roseate or Arctic tern. Common terns overwinter off the coast of western and southern Africa. They are found breeding in much of Europe, Asia, and North America. All three species are affectionately referred to as sea swallows, but this nickname is most frequently given to the common tern. The buoyancy of the common tern's flight is also reflected in its Latin name, Sterna hirundo. Hirundo is the Latin name for swallows and martins, and sterna refers to terns. So in essence, their Latin name is the swallow tern, which is beautifully descriptive. During the breeding season, Arctic terns have a full black cap and a dark red bill. Their tail streamers extend beyond the wingtips, although not to the same extent as for roseate terns. They have greyish underparts and look greyer overall than the other two species. They also have short, dark red legs, giving them a slightly dumpier appearance when standing than the other two species. Like the common tern, they can be found breeding in much of Europe, Asia, and North America. However, they do not breed as far south as common terns and are capable of breeding at more northerly latitudes than common terns. Ireland is at the southern limit of the Arctic tern's breeding range. The Arctic tern overwinters as far south as the Antarctic coast. This means that for those terns breeding in the Arctic Circle, they literally undertake a pole-to-pole migration twice each year. Therefore, perhaps unsurprisingly, the Arctic tern has the longest migration of any species on Earth. To put the overall distance which these birds travel into context, they migrate the equivalent of 3 to 4 round trips to the moon over the course of their lives, which typically range from 25 to 30 years. Back in Ireland, these species have been monitored and protected by the Dalkey Tern Conservation Project since 1995. The Dalkey Tern Conservation Project was led by volunteers from the South Dublin Birdwatch Ireland branch and several Birdwatch Ireland staff members. Dún Laoghaire County Council contributed funding to the project during these years. Between 1997 and 1999, the project received EU Interreg funding and a part-time warden was employed. It was at this stage that conservation efforts to encourage roseate terns to nest at the site began. From 2000 to 2015, the project was once more volunteer-led, with funding provided by Dún Laoghaire County Council. Since its inception in the mid-1990s, the aim of the Dalkey Tern Conservation Project has been to create and sustain safe breeding habitat for common, Arctic and roseate terns, with a particular focus on the roseate tern. In 2016, the EU Life Roseate Tern Recovery Project and Dún Laoghaire County Council funded a 5-year project of which 2020 was the final year. The overarching aims of the Roseate Tern Recovery Project were to increase the breeding population of roseate terns in the UK and Ireland, to enable re-expansion of roseate terns in the UK and Ireland, and to establish long-term options for management and establishment of roseate tern colonies in northwestern Europe. There were 8 project sites across the UK and Ireland. The main roseate tern colonies were Rockabill Island off the North County Dublin coast in Ireland, Ladies Island Lake in County Wexford, Ireland, and Coquet Island off the coast of Northumberland in the UK. In 2021, more than 1,700 breeding pairs of roseates were recorded on Rockabill Island, the highest number ever on record for this island. 290 pairs were recorded at Ladies Island Lake in the same year, and 150 pairs of roseate terns were recorded at Coquet Island in 2021. So why all the fuss about roseate terns? The roseate tern is one of Europe's most endangered seabirds. Outside of Ireland, this species is actually red listed, which means it's threatened with extinction as a breeding species. There are a number of factors which have contributed to this species' decline. In the 1800s, the roseate tern was hunted to the edge of extinction for the millinery trade. During this period, hats fitted with feathers or taxidermied birds were considered the height of fashion among Victorian women. Thanks to legislation and management, the population began to recover in the early 20th century, with a peak in numbers in the 1960s. In 1968, the estimated number of roseate tern pairs in Europe was 3,812 pairs. However, after this point, their numbers began to freefall in Europe once more until just 561 pairs were recorded in 1987. This drastic decline was attributed to factors at the breeding grounds, including human disturbance, storm surges, and depredation by species such as gulls, brats, and some wading bird species. Trapping at their winter sites in Ghana was also identified as a serious threat. However, there is good news. In response to this decline, several key sites for breeding roseate terns were identified, and management efforts to protect these beautiful birds were put in place. One of these sites is Rockabill Island, which has been managed by Birdwatch Ireland for over 30 years. Rockabill lies approximately 7 kilometres off the North County Dublin coast. In 1989, there were 152 pairs of roseate terns breeding on the island. As of 2021, there are over 1,700 pairs. This represents approximately 80% of northwestern Europe's breeding population of roseate terns. This intensive management effort is part of the reason roseate terns are amber listed in Ireland rather than red listed. They are no longer on the brink of extinction as a breeding species in Ireland, in large part due to the intensive management of the Rockabill colony by Birdwatch Ireland and funded by the National Parks and Wildlife Service and for several years the EU Life Roseate Tern Recovery Project. This is an amazing success story. However, the adage about eggs in baskets comes to mind. Having this higher proportion of northwestern Europe's breeding population of roseate terns at one site makes the population very susceptible to changes in local breeding conditions. So what we need to do is diversify the availability of breeding habitat to safeguard the future of this charismatic species. This is where the Dalkey Islands come in. So why did the EU Life Roseate Tern Recovery Project focus on the Dalkey Islands? There are several reasons. Roseate terns have nested on the islands in the past, with a peak of 11 pairs recorded in 2004. The Dalkey Islands were also traditionally a common tern colony, and common terns are thought to be the preferred species amongst which roseate terns nest. Finally, the islands were already designated as a special protection area for terns, which means that legal protections were already in place on the islands. When a common Arctic or roseate tern is selecting a breeding site, there is key criteria they are looking for. These include a lack of predators, other terns breeding at the site, an availability of food in close proximity, and for the roseate tern, cover to nest under. The Dalkey Islands provided much of what a tern requires at a breeding site. Firstly, there was an existing tern colony. Secondly, nest boxes have been provided on the island since 1997. The Kish Bank, a shallow sandbank which is considered important for foraging seabirds, lies just a few kilometres east of the Dalkey Islands. Therefore, ostensibly, food availability for nesting terns was not a problem. Thus, nearly everything a tern would look for in a breeding habitat was available. However, there are three major problems for terns on the Dalkey Islands. Firstly, avian and mammalian predation were a significant concern on the colony. Secondly, most terns were nesting on maiden rock. This islet is very low-lying and thus is very susceptible to storm surges, which can chill eggs or chicks or even wash them out to sea. It was hoped that by solving predation issues on Lamb Island, we could encourage terns to switch their preferred nesting location from Maiden Rock to Lamb Island. Lamb Island sits much higher in the water and is not vulnerable to sea swells. Thus, the risk of eggs and chicks being lost to sea from this island is limited. The third issue for terns on the islands is disturbance. This is of particular significance for terns on Dalkey Island, which is open to the public. As mentioned previously, terns nest on the ground and their eggs and chicks are well camouflaged. This means they can easily be accidentally trampled underfoot. Repeated disturbance, particularly by dogs, can also lead to abandonment of the site by the adults. We undertook a number of steps to resolve these problems. The first step we took was to begin a rat eradication programme on Lamb and Dalkey Island over 2 winters, beginning in 2018 and ending in 2020. Each winter we laid a 50 by 50 metre grid of bait stations across Lamb and Dalkey Island. The bait stations are plastic tubes 75 centimetres in length. A metal peg was fitted at either end of the tunnel to restrict access to other species. At the end of the programme in 2019, we were still recording bait take from a small number of bait stations on Dalkey Island, indicating that rats were still present on the island. We repeated the programme in the winter of 2020. Bait take decreased significantly toward the end of the project and no bait was taken on the final visit before the stations were removed. It was unclear if this reduction in bait take was due to rats being eradicated from the islands or if they had simply stopped eating the bait. To test this, we hope to carry out some monitoring for the presence or absence of rats in March 2020. Unfortunately, COVID-19 restrictions prevented us from being able to carry out this part of the project. However, several factors indicate that rats have been completely removed from the islands, or at the very least, their numbers have been significantly reduced. Firstly, there has been no evidence of rats on trail cameras on Lamb or Dalkey Island since 2019. Secondly, there has been no evidence of rat predation of eggs or chicks over the last 3 seasons. Up until the 2019 breeding season, predation caused at least in part by rats was resulting in either no chicks or very few chicks surviving on Lamb Island. This changed after rat control work began in the winter of 2018-2019. On Dalkey Island itself, before 2019, chicks were never recorded living for more than approximately 1 week. It was only after we began to control the rat population on Dalkey and Lamb Island in 2018 and 2019 that chicks began to survive to the fledgling stage. These factors suggest that the rat population on Dalkey and Lamb Islands is either completely gone or that it exists in very, very small numbers. Other species breeding on the islands also benefit from the removal or reduction of rats on the islands. These include oystercatcher, rock pipit, and shelduck. So why are rats a problem for seabirds? Seabirds have evolved to nest on islands and cliff faces, as these sites were traditionally free of mammalian predators. As a result, these ground nesting birds have not evolved adequate defences against potential predators such as rats. Removing rats from islands can have a dramatic impact on seabird populations. This was well demonstrated on Lundy Island off the Devon coast in England, where a rat eradication programme began in 2002 and ran for 2 years. Prior to the beginning of the project, there were estimated to be just 13 pairs of puffins nesting on the island. In 2019, it was reported that numbers had risen to 375 pairs. An even more dramatic increase in Manx shearwater numbers has been recorded, rising from 297 pairs before the rat eradication project began to just over 5,500 pairs recorded in 2019. It is estimated that approximately 10% of all species on the brink of extinction could be saved by removing invasive species. The second major factor leading to colony collapses on the Dalkey Islands between 2016 and 2018 was avian predation. Although corvids were known to predate chicks and eggs, trail camera footage in 2017 and 2018 indicated that large gulls were the main avian predators at this time. Large gulls are a natural part of a marine ecosystem. In a healthy ecosystem, tern populations would be stable enough to be able to cope with a certain level of gull predation. The fact that we have to protect tern species not only from invasive predators such as rats, but also from natural predators such as gulls, is a clear indication of the pressure terns are under as a breeding species. To deter gulls from taking tern eggs or chicks, between 2019 and 2021, we erected a 1 metre by 1 metre grid of canes at alternate angles across a portion of Lamb Island. Terns which have a wingspan of less than 1 metre can easily flit between the canes. But the 3 large species of gulls, all of which have a wingspan of greater than 1 metre, cannot fly into the colony. This was first trialled on the Farne Islands in England by Chris Redfern and colleagues at the ORSPB. Unfortunately, it was not possible to use this method on Dalkey Island, as the area the terns nest on is not vegetated. Instead, in addition to traditional nest boxes, we also used some of the plastic pipes previously used during the baiting program as additional chick shelters. Chicks were able to shelter in these out of reach of gulls and corvids. As the tern colony has grown on the main island, Dalkey Island, disturbance from people and dogs has become an increasing cause for concern. In order to try to minimise disturbance to the terns on Dalkey Island, temporary fencing is erected around the tern nest sites. Signage commissioned by Dún Laoghaire County Council is placed at the tern and gull nesting sites. Dún Laoghaire County Council has also installed signage at the landing pier, which, among other things, alerts people to the fact that dogs are not allowed on the island due to the significant risk they pose to wildlife. Weekend wardening and guided walks have increased from 2 days per month to every weekend, increasing public engagement with the project and the nature and ecology of the Dalkey Islands. The question is, though, are these measures working? The answer so far appears to be yes. Although numbers of pairs breeding on the islands have not yet reached the numbers recorded in 2016 and 2017, there has been a year-on-year increase in numbers of terns breeding on the islands since rat control and gull deterrence measures were introduced in 2019. The number of chicks we estimated to have survived and flown from the colony as a proportion of the number of breeding pairs also increased from 2019 to 2021 compared to previous years. This signals that the colony is beginning to recover. This slide is another way of illustrating the number of chicks which survive to leave the islands, i.e. fledged. We divide the number of chicks fledged by the number of nests, and this gives us an estimate of the number of chicks fledged per pair. We can see an increase in the number of chicks which survived per pair between 2019 and 2021 compared to previous years. Despite the dip in productivity in 2021 compared to 2019 and 2020, this increase in chick survival rates still reinforces the significant impact that measures taken to control rat and gull predation had on the tern colony. The dip in number of chicks which survived to leave the Dalkey Islands in 2021 compared to 2019 and 2020 reinforces that this tern colony still faces pressures, including human disturbance, avian predation, and exposure to the elements, which require further mitigation in the future. The proportion of terns attempting to nest on maiden rock decreased significantly in 2020 and 2021 compared to previous years. In 2020 and 2021, common terns nested on Lamb and Dalkey Islands. Prior to 2020, common terns were only recorded nesting on Lamb Island once, and were never recorded on Dalkey Island. This suggests that common terns are switching their preferred nest site from Maiden Rock to the other 2 islands. If this is the case, it is really encouraging, as it means common terns are not abandoning the colony, but instead are finding alternative breeding habitat on Lamb and Dalkey Islands. This movement of terns from Maiden Rock to one of the other 2 islands was one of our key management aims. Interestingly, the percentage of the tern colony nesting on Dalkey Island has increased significantly over the last 3 years. In 2020, the majority of terns nested at the subsite, while in 2021, roughly equal proportions of terns in the colony nested on Lamb and Dalkey Islands. This has never been recorded previously. There are several possible reasons for this increase. It is possible that the removal or reduction of rats on Dalkey Island has encouraged more terns to nest on the island. At the beginning of the 2020 and 2021 seasons, public access to Dalkey Island was restricted. The decrease in foot traffic may have also played a role in the increase in terns nesting on the island. There is also a greater availability of nesting space on Dalkey Island compared to Lamb Island, which may encourage birds to breed there. However, the reason for the high proportion of terns nesting on Dalkey Island over the last 2 seasons is probably a combination of all three factors. We have seen an increase in the numbers of pairs of terns breeding at the colony this season. 42 pairs of terns were recorded on Lamb Island this year, compared to 19 last year. On Dalkey Island, 37 pairs nested in 2021, compared to 25 pairs last season. This is really important as terns depend on each other to defend their nests and chicks from predators. When a potential predator is spotted, the terns rise up off the nest and work together to mob the intruder until it hopefully leaves empty-handed. Therefore, the more terns present, the better protected the colony is. Thus, the increase in tern numbers on the Dalkey Islands is really encouraging, and it is hoped that through continued management, the colony will continue to grow. The presence of previously ringed terns on the Dalkey Islands, both last season and this season, is encouraging. The bird in the top right-hand corner is one of 4 chicks assumed to have fledged in 2017 from Maiden Rock. This bird was spotted on Dalkey Island in 2020, and at 3 years old managed to successfully fledge at least 1 chick. The return of a proportion of seabirds to the colony at which they hatched is vital to the longevity of that colony. The return of birds to the colony at which they hatched is known as natal fidelity. The bird in the bottom left corner was originally ringed as a breeding adult on the Skerries Islands in Wales. It was one of 3,000 Arctic terns which deserted the Skerries colony in 2020 after peregrine falcon took up residence on the islands. The presence of this Arctic tern breeding on the Dalkey Islands signifies the importance of a diversity of safe breeding spaces. Several adult Arctic terns were caught on the nest this season. One of these birds had been ringed on Rockabill in July 2000 as a chick, making it 21 years old. The recruitment of breeding terns from other colonies to the Dalkey Islands is significant as, like natal fidelity, it contributes to the longevity of the colony. The presence of immature terns prospecting at the colony is also encouraging. It is hoped that they will return to breed when they reach maturity and bolster the population. Finally, roseate terns were recorded on and in the vicinity of Lamb Island in July 2020 and 2021. The return of roseate terns as a breeding species on the islands is the ultimate aim of the Dalkey Tern Conservation Project. We are hopeful that they like what they saw and will return to the islands to make use of the many nest boxes we have placed across the colony for their benefit. In summary, the number of breeding pairs on the Dalkey Islands are beginning to increase. The number of chicks fledged per breeding pair on the Dalkey Islands has also increased significantly since rat eradication and gull deterrence measures were first introduced in 2019. Terns appear to be switching from Maiden Rock to Lamb and Dalkey Islands, making them less vulnerable to extreme weather events. Roseate terns may be prospecting at the Dalkey Islands, which is also extremely encouraging. The Dalkey tern colony still faces several challenges, including avian predation, exposure to wind and rain, which can chill eggs and chicks, and human disturbance. Through continued monitoring and management, it is hoped that we can continue to safeguard the future of this small but intrepid colony. The ultimate aim of the Dalkey Tern Conservation Project is to create safe alternative breeding habitat for roseate terns. In the process of managing the islands in pursuit of this aim, the byproduct has been the creation of alternative breeding habitat for the Arctic tern, a species whose numbers are falling rapidly on the eastern and southeastern coast of Ireland. There are 3 main tern colonies on the Irish eastern and southeastern seaboard. These are Rockabill Island, Dublin Port, and Ladies Island Lake in County Wexford. On Rockabill, a peak of 359 Arctic tern pairs was recorded in 2009. By 2020, numbers had fallen to 26 pairs. At Ladies Island Lake between 2015 and 2020, Arctic tern numbers fell from 849 pairs in 2015 to 435 pairs in 2020. At Dublin Port, the proportion of Arctic terns within the colony is tracked through ringing of chicks. An increase in the number of Arctic tern chicks ringed in 2018 was extremely positive. However, despite this, based on the number of chicks ringed from 2016 onward, it would appear that overall a decline in Arctic tern numbers has occurred in Dublin Port. Predation is thought to be the major factor driving declines at all three colonies. At Rockabelle Island, further steps were taken this year to protect Arctic tern chicks from predation, and a small but encouraging increase in the number of Arctic tern chicks surviving was recorded. At the Dublin Port Tern colony, it has been difficult to protect the Arctic tern colony because until a trail camera caught an otter on the subcolony this year, we were unsure what was predating chicks and eggs. This knowledge will help us to better defend Arctic terns in Dublin Port from predation. Therefore, the colonisation of the Dalkey Islands by Arctic terns is extremely positive, especially in light of the success of the 2019 to 2021 breeding seasons compared to previous seasons. Over the coming seasons, it is hoped that the Arctic tern colony will continue to grow. A small number of common tern pairs also breed at the site, and it is hoped that through continued management their numbers will continue to increase on Lamb and Dalkey Islands. We also have our fingers crossed that roseate terns will once more breed on the Dalkey Islands in the not too distant future. In order to secure the long-term success of the Dalkey Island tern colony, we need to reduce disturbance at the colony, particularly on Dalkey Island, which is a public park. Measures include continued weekend wardening when footfall is highest, and potentially the building of a permanent fence around the tern nesting site on Dalkey Island to prevent people, dogs and goats from entering the breeding area. We also need to continue to monitor for incursions of rats onto the islands. Rats can swim distances of greater than 1 kilometre. As the Dalkey Islands are approximately 300 metres from the mainland, reincursions of rats onto the island are a very real threat. We need to continue to deter gulls and other avian predators from taking tern eggs and chicks. Further measures to protect terns from avian predation may include the building of a predator-proof fence to stop gulls walking into the colony. Finally, as the colony grows, more chick shelters are required to protect the birds from the elements at this vulnerable stage. And it is hoped that through continued management measures, one day the skies over the Dalkey Islands may look something like this. If you would like to support this and other conservation projects that Birdwatch Ireland is carrying out, and you have the means to do so, please consider becoming a member by visiting the Birdwatch Ireland website. Your support helps us make a real difference for Irish wildlife. If you are already a member, thank you so much. Your support is greatly appreciated. A massive thanks to everyone who's donated their time, expertise and enthusiasm to the project. A special thank you to the South Dublin Birdwatch Ireland branch, who've been actively involved with the project since it began. Also to Ken, Johnny and David Cunningham for ferrying us back and forth to the islands, and for being genuinely sane people with a love for their home place. Thanks also to our funders, Dunleary Rathdown County Council, and to the EU Life Roseate Tern Recovery Project for funding 5 of the last 6 years. And finally, thank you so much for listening.
Okay, Tara, thanks a million for that. That was absolutely brilliant. Yeah, well presented.
Sorry.
Very clear presenting. Yeah, good radio voice. Yeah, just a few questions. I was just thinking, so it seems like is there plenty of room on Dalkey Island for, like, just looking at the pictures there, like there's plenty of room to grow the colony. And,
yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Yeah, potentially. I mean, Dalkey Island is 11.2 hectares, so in theory there's 11.2 hectares there, but it is a public park as well. And also, obviously, not all of that space is going to be suitable for terns. We also have a really, really big gull colony there. So over 100 great black-backed gulls nest there. We have like around 50 herring gulls and around 50 lesser black-backed gulls also nesting there. So they obviously take that space. Although there is one pair of Arctic terns that nest in among the gulls, and somehow they've managed to fledge chicks the last 2 years. I don't understand how, but they have. But yeah, just going back to your question, there is a lot more space on Dalkey Island. The terns have kind of picked one spot over in the north eastern corner. That's completely, it's a rock face. And that has a good bit of space on it, but there's issues around that, like you've got disturbance there, you've got gulls actually nesting just on the edge of that, so that kind of ties in the amount of space that they can use there. And then on the rest of the island, they've tried elsewhere, so they tried kind of in the middle of the island and at the landing pier, but it just doesn't work out for them just because of disturbance. So even though there's loads of space there, disturbance and the presence of other species breeding kind of confines them a little bit.
Yeah, and do they nest close together, or do they like to have room between them?
Yeah, so Arctic terns typically like a little bit more room between them than common terns. Common terns kind of bunch in quite close together, whereas Arctic terns kind of like their own space a wee bit. So that also constrains the size of the colony. But they will bunch in a bit. They just prefer a little bit more space.
Okay, but there is room for more to grow the colony.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
What's the minimum number of terns? You're saying the more terns, the more protection they have, so they're not spending the whole time defending the nest, and they can go and forage for food, etc. But is there a minimum amount of terns to start a new colony?
Well, like on Dalkey Island itself, so the whole thing is a colony, but on Dalkey Island, so there's Dalkey Lamb and Maiden Rock. On Dalkey Island itself, that subcolony started out with 6, say in 2000. Well, it had 6 pairs there in 2019, and that's gone up now to like 47 from those 6. So it can grow slowly. Those 6 pairs actually managed to fledge all their chicks, so they managed to defend themselves just with 6 of them there. And that pair that I was talking about that's off on its own down among the gulls, that's just 2 terns against like several hundred gulls. So yeah, they can get lucky even with small numbers, but the more that are there, obviously the better protected they are.
And they're site faithful, are they? Do they come back to the same?
Yeah, to the same place. I think with roseate terns, they found that they're not just site faithful, but they're faithful to the exact spot where they bred the year before. So if you move the nest box where the roseate tern bred in, they'll just go beside the nest box to where they laid the eggs the last time. It's just really interesting.
And they pair for life, is that right?
Yeah, I'm actually not 100% certain about that, so I can't say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm including all terns together, obviously.
Yeah, like they, as far as I'm aware, they will, but obviously if the other one doesn't turn up, they will find somebody else to breed with. Okay. And I think there is divorce as well in the tern gullies, but I'm not, or tern species, but I need to double check that.
We won't comment on that.
Yeah.
So Angela wanted to know, so on Dalkey Island, there's roseate common and Arctic, but can you tell us a little bit about sandwich and little terns and in Ireland, in the Irish context?
Yeah, so on Dalkey Island, we don't actually have roseate terns, unfortunately. We used to have roseate terns, and we're hoping for them to come back, but we don't have them currently. Sandwich and little terns. So the biggest little tern colony is down in Kilcoo, and then there's a few satellite ones up at Portrane and Baltray, where they've been doing quite well as well. And the largest tern or sandwich tern colony is down at Ladies Island Lake, I think. So yeah, they're doing quite well down there as far as I'm aware. But they have slightly different needs. So little terns like to nest on beaches, and sandwich terns kind of, I'm not actually sure with sandwich terns. I think they like beaches as well. But my area has been common in Arctic and roseate, so I can't, I don't know a whole pile about sandwich terns, unfortunately, sorry.
Okay, you're specialized now. How long did it take you to learn your terns and distinguish them?
Yeah, it takes a bit of time. It takes, like, you will get it. And it kind of just happens suddenly. So you'll be watching them for a while and they'll all look exactly the same, and it'll be really, really frustrating. But the more you watch them, you'll keep watching them, and one day you'll be like, oh my God, that's an Arctic tern, and you'll know it in flight, you'll know it by the wing pattern, or you'll know its call or whatever, or you'll know a common tern, and the way they sit is quite different. It's all about getting the eye in, and it's just practice.
Yeah. Chris wants to know, would it be realistic to completely eliminate rats from Dalkey Island? And now that you think it might be low numbers, how long do you think it'll be free for? And what about swimming rats?
Yeah, it's a good question. So no, it is going to get recolonized by rats. There's a really good source of food out there for them, and it's really close to the mainland, so they can easily access it. So it's just, it's really depressing, but it's just a matter of time. But there are measures that you can take to maybe not, there are measures you can take to monitor for the reincursion of rats and then take action afterwards. So what we can do is put out trail cameras, which we have been doing already. And during the rat baiting program, we're putting out these small wax blocks that are flavored with chocolate, because rats have a massive sweet tooth. And you put them out across the island. The rats find them, they have a nibble, and then we go back and look, and we can tell by the teeth marks whether it's rats that have been there or not. And that gives us an indication of whether we need to start another baiting program again. But unfortunately, it will more than likely happen again. We just have to be reactive to it.
Okay. Lucas wants to know, is Dalkey Island accessible to the public? And what are the best months to see them?
Yeah.
And just on that as well, what impact, can you tell us a little bit about the impact that visitors to the island have on the terns?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, like public engagement is really important. It's really important to the project. It's really important to conservation. We all know this. Like it's key. It's critical to have people on our side. So having people coming across the island, particularly if they're going on the guided walks and they're learning about the colony, is really, really great. The flip side of that is that sometimes some people cross the colony. So we do have fences up, we do have signage up, but some people mightn't. They might just cross anyway. And what can happen, and what has happened very rarely, to be fair, but what has happened is eggs have been trampled underfoot, but also it can lead to colony desertions. So if they're regularly disturbed at the island, the colony can just give up and leave, which is obviously not what any of us want. To be fair, on the Dalkey Islands, the amount of people walking across the colony has actually been quite low in comparison to the number of people who are actually on the island. It does happen, but it has been an issue, but it hasn't been as high an issue as you would expect given the number of people that are actually using the island. So for the most part, people are really sound and aren't crossing the fences into the Tern colony. If you wanted to go out to see the terns, which I would highly recommend, your best month to do that really is June, or the start of July at the latest. And I'd recommend going on the guided walks. They're completely free. And the warden will show you around and tell you a little bit about the Tern colony, tell you how many chicks there are, and it's a really nice way to kind of engage with the colony, and you can go off on your own then and do what you like on the island within reason. So
are dogs allowed on the island?
No, so dogs aren't allowed on the island, but unfortunately they are still being brought across the island. It's an issue that really does need to be enforced. It's very difficult to enforce. I do appreciate that, but yeah, technically not allowed on the island, and for good reason, because like we have a feral goat herd out there, so they have kids. We have a lot of breeding birds that are on the ground as well, and so it can wreak havoc out there, to be honest.
Ian Toomey was asking, I think there might have been a picture of this, but are shell duck breeding on the island? Yeah,
they breed in the rabbit burrows, which is really nice.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think 2019, the first year after we did the rat control work, was the first year that we had records of shell duck actually getting chicks off of, or getting ducklings or whatever shell ducks are called, off of the island. So yeah, it's the first year that they had young actually make it.
And the bamboo poles, were they actually, did you actually use those bamboo poles in the end, or that was just an idea, but there was no vegetation, is that right?
No, so on Lamb Island we did end up using, we used the bamboo poles on Lamb Island. Sorry if that wasn't clear. On Lamb Island is vegetated, so we can drive the bamboo poles into the ground. But on Dalkey Island, it's not vegetated, so we can't use them there.
Okay.
So yeah, so we could only use them on one of the sub-colonies.
When during the breeding season did you?
Yeah, so for the first 2 breeding seasons, 2019 and 2020, we did it before the terns arrived. But what we noticed in 2020 was it was really windy, as it has been the last few years. So the terns were actually nesting. It seemed to be like, this is our theory, is that they were spooked by the canes moving and were nesting outside of the caned off area. So this year we waited until a good proportion of the colony had nested, and then we put the bamboo canes in on Lamb Island, so that they were kind of a bit more protected.
Okay. Are all the juveniles ringed each year, or is it just a selection?
So it should be all of them.
Yeah.
The tern chicks are very good at evading detection, particularly on Lamb Island, where they can get down into the rabbit burrows. They can hide in among the nettles and stuff like that. So yeah, we do a colony sweep, but some inevitably get away.
Okay. And there's a question about the otter. That was in Dublin Bay, wasn't it? Was it just one sighting of the otter?
No, there were a few sightings over a couple of nights.
Okay, cool too. The poor otter. You don't have any hedgehogs out on the island either, do you?
Nope, none of those swimming.
What is the most suitable vegetation to have growing around the tern colonies? What would be the perfect vegetation?
What kind of vegetation to have, like in the colony itself, or like?
Yeah, is there something, an ideal vegetation around them?
Yeah, so with Arctic terns, they really like kind of a short turf. So basically, like ground that's grazed quite tightly. So the rabbits do a good job of that.
Yeah.
So that's really good for them for laying on, or they like a rock face. So they'll nest on either of those. But then on Lamb Island, it's really cool because in the middle of it we have all these nettles and thistles and stuff, which the terns won't lay in. They won't nest there, but the chicks can use it as shelter and protection from like potential predators, like gulls and stuff like that. So it seems like and our productivity on Lamb Island is actually a little bit higher, and I don't know if that's because of vegetation or if that's just because the terns that are nesting on Lamb Island are a little bit more experienced, or because there's more shelter there. I'm not really sure, but it does seem like having that vegetation there, that kind of long vegetation that the chicks can hide in, is quite beneficial. So a mixture really is what you're looking for.
So another question with the vegetation. Does the change in vegetation by excluding the goats improve the habitat or make it less suitable due to more vegetation?
Well, where the goats... Oh, sorry, go on.
I know, what difference have you noticed?
Well, we haven't actually excluded the goats at all. So goats are still roaming free anywhere they want to go, which is all right. Where the goats are, so the goats are only on Dalkey Island. They used to travel across to Lamb Island because it's connected at low tide, but this herd for some reason isn't doing it these years. But on Dalkey Island, where the terns are nesting, it's completely rock. Like there's no real grass or anything there. So it makes absolutely no difference vegetation-wise whether the goats are on it or not.
Brilliant. All right, there's one more question, which was from Kyle Sweeney. He wants to know, can we get bird watching as an Olympic sport? I think it must have come in the middle of the Olympic fever, but yeah, definitely we'll try our best, won't we?
Yeah.
Another question from Irene, small bones and shells for nesting material. Are they old bones, old dry bones, or fresh bones? Do you know? Have they washed up or?
I'm not sure. Like they're picked pretty clean, so they don't look like, I've never seen like anything with anything on it. But yeah, anything I've seen has been kind of old enough. It's not like they've killed something and then decorated the nest. It seems like something that they've picked up along the way, something that they found in their local kind of area and started decorating the nest with that.
Yeah, and there's a goat, don't the goats have a goat graveyard in one of the buildings with lots of bones?
Do they?
I seem to remember that. I was there years ago. There's lots of the goats in one of there's abandoned buildings, isn't there?
Yeah.
There was lots of, have you been in them?
Yeah.
When I was there, there's loads of goat, just bones.
Oh, it's bleak.
I was told they go there as sort of that's where they go.
Maybe it is.
Wow. Okay, brilliant. That's fantastic. Thanks a million. I think it's such a cool project, such a cool location, and yeah, it's like a real hopeful project as well. Excellent work happening there.
Thank you.
So thanks a million, Tara, for that.
No problem.
And thanks everyone for joining. We will be having more webinars coming up over the next couple of months. So just keep an eye on our social media. Yeah, so we're going to be linking in with some shorebirds and the garden bird survey coming up. So thanks a million everyone for joining. This is going to be available on YouTube probably from next week. So good. Good night, everyone, and thanks a million for joining.